At 2:17 in the morning, an American early warning satellite detects 6 powerful flashes rising from Russian territory. Within seconds, military computers classify them as possible intercontinental ballistic missile launches. Their projected destination, North America. Estimated time until impact, 23 minutes. Warning sirens erupt inside a secure military command center. Officers turn toward a giant screen as 6 red lines begin moving across the Arctic. But there is something nobody inside that room knows. Russia has launched nothing. And within the next few minutes, Moscow will become convinced that America is preparing to attack. This is how World War III could begin without either side deciding to start it. What follows is a fictional simulation, not a prediction, but it is built around something terrifyingly real. Nuclear warning systems have produced false alerts before, and during a genuine crisis, leaders might have only minutes to discover the truth. At 2:18 a.m., American officers begin searching for confirmation. Satellites can detect the intense heat created during a missile launch, but ground-based radar must also locate and track the weapons. At this moment, however, the supposed missiles remain beyond the radar horizon. For several agonizing minutes, the satellites are the only systems reporting an attack. One officer suggests that the warning could be a sensor error. Another points out that all 6 detections appeared within seconds of one another. That looks coordinated. The information is immediately sent higher through the chain of command. Senior military leaders are awakened, secure communication systems come online, and the president is moved to a protected location. Nobody has ordered retaliation. Not yet. But the machinery created to survive a surprise attack is already beginning to move. At 2:20 a.m., strategic command aircraft are prepared for takeoff. Military communications suddenly increase. Bombers are placed on alert, while naval forces receive emergency instructions to maintain contact and prepare for possible operations. These are defensive measures. But from the other side of the world, they do not look defensive. Russian intelligence satellites detect unusual activity at American air bases. Aircraft are being moved. Command networks are transmitting at emergency levels. Tankers are preparing to support long-range missions. Russia does not know that America is responding to 6 missiles that do not exist. Russian commanders see only the visible actions, and those actions look like the opening stages of an attack. At 2:22 a.m., the Russian military raises the readiness of several units. Interceptors are ordered into the air. Mobile missile forces begin moving away from known positions, and senior officials are rushed into emergency command facilities. America immediately detects those movements. To the Americans, Russia's sudden activity appears to confirm the original warning. The false alarm is now creating evidence to support itself. America moves because it believes Russia has launched missiles. Russia moves because it sees America preparing for war. America then interprets the Russian response as proof that the attack is real. Neither side understands that it is reacting to the other side's fear. At 2:25 a.m., the 6 supposed missiles should be approaching the range of American ground radar. Operators wait for the first confirmed track. Nothing appears. The radar screens remain empty. For the first time, some officers inside the American command center believe the satellite warning may be wrong. But the computer continues displaying 6 incoming weapons. The original detection has already been processed into predicted flight paths, impact zones, and countdown timers. Every passing second creates 2 completely different realities. In one reality, America is less than 20 minutes away from a nuclear attack. In the other, there is nothing in the sky. The president is presented with incomplete information. No ground radar confirmation. No communication from Russia. No evidence of explosions. But multiple satellite detections and rapidly increasing Russian military activity. Waiting could prevent a catastrophic mistake. Waiting could also leave the country unable to respond if the missiles are real. At 2:27 a.m., an emergency message is prepared for Moscow. The United States asks whether Russia has detected an unauthorized launch or an accident at one of its missile facilities. But communication between nuclear powers during a crisis is not like making an ordinary phone call. Messages must be authenticated. Translations must be checked. Leaders must be confident that they are speaking to the real government and not receiving carefully designed deception. The message does not immediately reach the Russian leader. At the same time, Russia attempts to contact Washington. Its message also becomes delayed inside the confusion. Both sides are trying to ask the same question. Are you attacking us? Neither receives an answer. At 2:30 a.m., the crisis spreads into Europe. NATO bases receive warnings that a possible strategic attack is underway. Fighters are launched to protect important airspace. Surveillance aircraft begin moving away from vulnerable locations. Civilian flights are quietly redirected from military corridors. Passengers sleeping inside those aircraft have no idea that the world beneath them has changed. Most governments still say nothing publicly. Officials fear that sending an emergency warning without confirmation would cause mass panic. But online flight trackers begin showing unusual activity. People notice command aircraft in the sky. Military enthusiasts post images of bombers moving across airfields. Unverified accounts claim that Russian missiles are already airborne. Within minutes, the phrase World War III begins spreading across social media. Some posts are real observations. Others are old videos, fake emergency messages, and computer-generated footage. Nobody can tell the difference. At 2:33 a.m., Russian radar detects several NATO aircraft approaching sensitive airspace near the Baltic region. The NATO aircraft are not preparing to attack. They are moving because commanders fear they could be destroyed on the ground. But Russian officers see aircraft changing direction while American nuclear forces are already on alert. They conclude that the missile warning may have been part of a larger operation. Russian fighters are ordered to intercept them. At 2:35 a.m., a Russian pilot locks radar onto a NATO surveillance aircraft. Warning signals begin screaming inside the NATO cockpit. Escorting fighters turn toward the approaching Russian aircraft. The Russian pilot believes he is preventing an attack. The NATO pilots believe an attack has already begun. For several seconds, the aircraft race directly toward one another. Then an air defense battery on the ground detects another object approaching the Russian-controlled zone. It is an unmanned NATO surveillance aircraft, but the battery's operators believe it could be a cruise missile. They have been told that Russian territory may already be under attack. The local commander has seconds to decide. At 2:36 a.m., he gives the order to fire. A surface-to-air missile rises into the night and destroys the unmanned aircraft. This is the first real weapon launched in the crisis. NATO detects the missile immediately. Commanders know one of their aircraft has disappeared, but they do not yet know whether it was crewed or unmanned. The attack is reported as the possible destruction of a NATO aircraft during an ongoing Russian missile strike. The original nuclear warning is still being investigated, but now something real has happened. At 2:38 a.m., NATO forces launch a limited conventional strike against the air defense battery. The objective is narrow: destroy the system before it can target more aircraft. Several missiles are fired. Russia detects them. For the first time that night, Russian warning systems are tracking actual weapons approaching Russian forces. To Moscow, the situation is now clear. American forces went on alert. NATO aircraft approached Russian airspace. Then NATO missiles were launched at a Russian military position. Russian leaders do not know that all of this began with a false warning inside an American computer. They believe the opening attack has arrived. At 2:40 a.m., American ground radar has still detected none of the 6 supposed intercontinental missiles. Technical specialists discover that the satellite system may have processed corrupted information. The 6 red tracks on the screen are not physical objects. They are computer-generated predictions created from the original false detections. There are no nuclear missiles approaching North America. The strategic warning is cancelled. For a moment, it appears that disaster has been prevented. Then the command center receives another message. NATO and Russian forces are exchanging real fire in Europe. The false nuclear attack is over. The real war has begun. At 2:42 a.m., Washington sends an urgent message to Moscow explaining that the original warning was an error. America confirms that no Russian strategic missiles are in the air and states that it has not authorized an attack on Russian territory. But from Moscow's perspective, NATO missiles are already hitting a Russian military installation. Russian officials suspect the message could be an attempt to create hesitation before a larger strike. They ask a simple question. If America was never under attack, why did NATO fire first? NATO gives a completely different version. Russia fired the first real missile when it destroyed the surveillance aircraft. The NATO strike was a defensive response. Russia argues that NATO aircraft were approaching its territory during an apparent American attack. America says it was responding to what appeared to be Russian missile launches. Every country believes it reacted defensively. Every country believes the other side made the first aggressive move. And every country has evidence supporting its version. At 2:49 a.m., Russia launches conventional missiles against the NATO airfield from which it believes the attack originated. NATO's collective defense system is activated. Additional aircraft enter the air. Warships move into combat positions. Cyber attacks begin disrupting communication networks, railways and government websites across Europe. By sunrise, military forces are fighting in several locations. Global markets are frozen. International flights are grounded. Borders begin closing, and millions of people wake to emergency alerts telling them to remain indoors. There has been no massive nuclear exchange, but World War III has started. Later, investigators examining the original American warning discover that a corrupted training package may have entered part of the operational processing system. The computer treated simulated missile data as a genuine detection and constructed 6 convincing flight paths. But by the time the mistake is understood, the equipment involved has been damaged, classified records have disappeared, and both sides are accusing the other of manipulating the evidence. Russia claims the false alarm was invented to justify NATO's attack. NATO claims Russian commanders knowingly escalated the crisis. Others believe an unknown country or independent group deliberately planted the false information, hoping the major powers would destroy one another. The truth becomes another battlefield. This scenario may sound impossible, but warning systems have failed before. In 1979, training data representing a large Soviet attack was accidentally fed into operational American warning computers. Military officials briefly saw indications that hundreds of missiles were approaching the United States. In 1983, a Soviet satellite system reported that American intercontinental missiles had been launched. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov judged the warning to be false because the pattern did not make sense for a genuine surprise attack. He was correct. The system had mistaken reflections of sunlight on clouds for missile launches. In both cases, technology produced terrifying information, but human beings waited for additional confirmation. That judgment helped prevent a computer error from becoming an irreversible military decision. Modern warning systems contain multiple sensors, verification procedures, and human safeguards. But technology cannot completely remove the most dangerous element from a crisis: uncertainty. A defensive action can look identical to preparation for an attack. Moving bombers away from danger can look like preparing to launch them. Dispersing military units can look like mobilization. Scrambling fighters to protect airspace can look like the beginning of an invasion. Once both sides expect betrayal, every attempt to survive becomes evidence of aggression. And that may be the most frightening way World War III could begin. Not with a leader intentionally pressing a button. Not with a carefully planned invasion, but with a warning that should never have appeared, followed by frightened people making rational decisions based on false information. The first weapon would not be a nuclear missile. It would be uncertainty. The first casualty would not be a city. It would be trust. And when two nuclear powers have only minutes to decide what is real, discovering the truth a few seconds too late could be enough to end the world as we know it. If you want to see what happens next, during the first 24 hours after this false alarm turns into a global war, subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments. Would world leaders still be able to stop the conflict? Or would the first mistake make every other mistake inevitable?